My daughter has been dead for 3 years. I know this because I was the one who identified her body. So when I saw her last Tuesday walking out of a Walgreens in Decatur, Georgia, I did not scream, I did not run. I stood completely still in the middle of the parking lot with my car keys in my hand, and I watched her get into a silver Honda and drive away. I am 67 years old. I have lived long enough to know the difference between grief playing tricks on your mind and something that is actually undeniably real. And what I saw that afternoon was real. Her walk. That was what got me first. She's always walked a certain way, left foot turning slightly outward, head tilted just enough to the right that it looks like she's always half listening for something. You don't notice a thing like that unless you spent 29 years watching someone grow from a baby who couldn't even hold her own head up into a woman you were proud of. I noticed. I've always noticed everything about her. I sat down on the hood of my car, right there in that parking lot, because my legs stopped working. An older gentleman in a green jacket asked if I needed help. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. Her name is Adrienne. She was 31 years old when she died, or when I was told she died, and she would be 34 now. The woman walking out of that Walgreens looked exactly 34. Let me go back to the beginning because none of this makes sense without the beginning. I raised Adrienne alone. Her father left when she was 4. Not dramatically, not with a fight, just quietly, like a tide going out. One morning he was there and the next he wasn't, and I spent about 6 months being devastated, and then I decided I didn't have time for that anymore. I had a little girl to raise. I worked as an administrative coordinator for a school district in Marietta for 22 years. I was careful with money. I was careful with everything. That was how we made it. Adrienne grew up to be someone I genuinely liked. That sounds like a strange thing for a mother to say, but I mean it as the highest compliment. She was funny in a dry, quiet way. She called me every Sunday without fail. She became a dental hygienist, which is not glamorous, but is honest work that pays decent and has good hours, and she was good at it. Her patients loved her. She had a gentleness about her that I cannot fully explain. It was just something she was born with. She married her husband when she was 26. I will call him her husband because that is what he was, legally, and because I still have trouble saying his name without my jaw tightening. He seemed fine at first. Quiet. Polite to me. He worked in logistics, something with warehouse management, and he made decent money. They bought a house in Smyrna. I thought she was happy. The first time I noticed something was off, Adrienne had a bruise on her forearm that she said was from bumping into a door frame. I let it go because I didn't want to be the kind of mother who sees problems that aren't there. The second time, she had a split lip that she said was from falling. The third time, I drove to her house unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon, and she answered the door in a long-sleeved shirt in August, and would not look me in the eyes. I asked her directly. She denied it directly. We had a long, painful conversation that went in circles, and I left feeling sick and helpless, which is the particular kind of helpless you feel when someone you love is in trouble and they won't let you help them. I called a domestic violence hotline that night, not for her, because she wouldn't take the number, but for myself, to ask what I was supposed to do. The woman I spoke with was kind, and she told me something I have thought about many times since, that the person has to be ready. You cannot drag them out. You can only keep the door open. I kept the door open. I called every Sunday. I drove by her house sometimes just to see if her car was in the driveway. I brought her food on holidays, so I had a reason to see her face. And then one morning, it was a Thursday in March, 3 years ago, her husband called me and said there had been an accident. He was crying on the phone, or doing something that sounded like crying, and he told me that Adrienne had gone off the road on Highway 78 near the exit for Stone Mountain. Her car had hit a barrier and gone into a drainage ditch that had water in it from the rain we'd had that week. By the time anyone got to her, it was too late. I remember holding the phone against my ear for a long time after he stopped talking. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember a cardinal sitting on the fence outside my kitchen window, the details your mind holds on to when the important thing is too large to hold. The police came. They were kind. There was an investigation, which is standard for a single-car accident with a fatality. They found no signs of foul play. The rain had been heavy. The road was slick. The drainage ditch was deeper than it should have been. It was ruled an accident. I identified her body. I planned her funeral. I sat in the front pew of First Baptist, and I received people's condolences, and I held myself together because there was no one else to hold things together for. We had no other family nearby. My sister lives in Oregon and could only come for 4 days. After she left, I was alone in a way. I had never been alone in my life. Not the alone of raising a child by yourself, which is busy and purposeful, but a flat, quiet, purposeless alone that I did not know what to do with. I sold her things. I kept 3 photographs and a quilt she'd made in a craft class 2 winters before she died. I went to grief counseling for 8 months. I learned to fill my days again. Gardening, a book club at the library, volunteering at the elementary school near my house on Tuesday afternoons. I built a life that did not have Adrian in it because that was the only life available to me. Until last Tuesday. I went back to that Walgreens the next morning. I told myself I was being foolish. I walked every aisle slowly, looking at nothing, killing time, waiting for something I couldn't name. I bought a bottle of hand lotion I didn't need. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. The silver Honda did not come back, but I had seen what I had seen. I am a practical woman. I do not believe in ghosts. I believe in what I can observe with my own eyes, and what I observed was a woman with my daughter's walk, my daughter's tilt of the head, my daughter's particular way of tucking her chin when she was thinking about something. The woman had shorter hair and was wearing clothes Adrian never would have worn, a grey hoodie, jeans, plain sneakers. But underneath all of that, the body moved exactly the way my daughter's body moved. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I made a decision that I knew, even as I made it, could either save me or completely unravel me. I decided to go back every day. For 6 days, nothing. I went in the mornings, around the time I had seen her. Around 11:30. I parked in the same spot. I bought small things I didn't need. On the 5th day, the cashier, a young woman with elaborate nail art, asked if I was doing okay, and I told her I was, that I just liked the store. She gave me a look that was kind and slightly concerned, and I didn't blame her. On the 7th day, I saw the silver Honda. I was already inside when she pulled in. I saw her through the front window, and I went very still near the display of reading glasses by the entrance, and I watched her come through the door. She went straight to the pharmacy counter. She had a prescription to pick up. I watched her give her name to the pharmacist. I was not close enough to hear it. The pharmacist went to find the prescription. While she waited, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through something, and for one moment she looked up, and I could see her face completely. It was Adrian. Not someone who resembled Adrian. Not a woman who happened to share certain features. It was my daughter's face, the small scar on her left eyebrow from when she fell off a bicycle at age 9, the slight asymmetry of her nose that she had always been self-conscious about, the particular shape of her eyes that her father had, and that I had always been grateful she inherited because they were beautiful. I gripped the rack of reading glasses to keep from falling down. She took her prescription and she left. I followed her. Not closely. I'm not a reckless person, and I was frightened of what I was doing even as I was doing it. But I followed the silver Honda out of the Walgreens parking lot and onto the main road, and I stayed 3 cars behind, and I drove and I breathed and I told myself to stay calm. She drove for about 12 minutes. She turned into a neighborhood of small houses, not run down but modest, the kind of neighborhood where people keep their yards neat and park their trucks in the driveway. She pulled into the driveway of a house that was painted a faded yellow. There were flower boxes in the windows, which stopped my heart because Adrienne always wanted flower boxes and her husband had never let her put them up. Said they looked tacky. She got out of the car with a pharmacy bag and a grocery bag I hadn't noticed in the back seat, and she walked up to the front door. A child, a little girl, maybe 2 or 3 years old, came running out of the house and grabbed her around the knees. I put my car in park. My daughter. If it was my daughter, and every cell in my body was telling me it was, picked up that little girl and put her on her hip and kissed the top of her head and went inside. I sat on that street for an hour. I thought about everything. I thought about the funeral. I thought about the body I had identified, the face I had looked at through a window in the medical examiner's office that I had understood to be hers. Was I wrong? Had I been so devastated that I confirmed something I was supposed to confirm without actually looking? I had looked. I was certain I had looked. But there are things you cannot unsee. And what I could not unsee now was that woman's face at the pharmacy counter. That scar. That nose. Those eyes. I drove home and I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, and then I went inside and called my son-in-law. He picked up on the second ring. I told him I needed to ask him something and that I needed him to be honest with me. I said I had seen something that was confusing me and I wanted to understand it. I kept my voice level. I am good at keeping my voice level even when everything inside me is not. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did you see?" Not "what do you mean?" Not "is everything okay?" he said. "What did you see?" And that question, in that tone, told me more than any answer he could have given. I told him I had seen Adrienne. The silence that followed was very long. He said I was grieving. He said that grief can make you see things. He said that he understood how hard this was, and that he thought I should call my counselor. I told him I had followed her to a yellow house in Decatur. I told him about the flower boxes and the little girl. Another silence. And then something shifted in his voice. The performance of concern dropped away, and what was left was just flatness. He said, "Stay out of this." I hung up. I sat in my kitchen and I cried for about 20 minutes, not from sadness, but from the particular overwhelm that comes when something that was supposed to be settled turns out not to be settled at all. When the story you had organized your grief around turns out to have been the wrong story. Then I stopped crying and I made a list. The first thing on the list was, what do I actually know? I knew I had seen a woman who appeared to be my daughter. I knew that my son-in-law's response to this information had not been the response of someone who was confident his wife was dead. I knew there was a child. I knew there were flower boxes. The second thing on the list was, who else knows? I've a cousin who lives in Brookhaven, about 15 minutes from where I grew up. He and Adrienne were close. She used to babysit his kids when she was in high school, and he had wept at her funeral in a way that had broken my heart at the time. I called him. I told him what I had seen. I asked if he knew anything. He was quiet for a moment. Not the guilty quiet of my son-in-law. More like the quiet of someone choosing their words. He said, "I need to tell you something, but I need you to understand why I didn't tell you before." I told him to tell me. He said that 8 months before the accident, before what I had believed was an accident, Adrienne had called him and asked for help. She had been trying to leave. She had been trying to leave for over a year. And every time to leave for over a year, and every time she made a move, her husband found out somehow and it got worse. She was frightened that if she simply left, he would find her. She had spoken to an advocate at a domestic violence organization, and they had explained something to her, that for some women in dangerous situations, the only exit that works is one where the danger believes there is no reason to keep looking. I stared at my kitchen wall. My cousin said, that Adrian had asked him to stay out of it completely for his own protection and hers. He had helped her with one thing, a small amount of money, enough to get established somewhere, and then he had stepped back as she had asked him to. He had not known where she was. He had grieved her, he said, in the strange way you grieve someone who is gone, but not gone. He had carried this for 3 years. I sat with this for a long time before I said anything. What I felt was not what I expected to feel. I expected to feel relief first, then anger. What I felt instead was something quieter, a kind of vertigo, like the floor shifting, like every solid thing I had built my last 3 years on reconstituting itself into a completely different shape. My daughter was alive. She had let me bury her. She had let me grieve her. She had let me sell her things and attend counselling and rebuild my life around her absence. She had made a choice that I had not been included in, and that choice had cost me 3 years of my life. I understood why. I understood it in my mind clearly and completely. I knew what her husband was. I had seen the bruises. I had heard the not quite right explanations. I knew that women in those situations sometimes have no clean options, only options that are less terrible than others. I understood, and I was still devastated. I went back to the yellow house the next morning. I knocked on the door. I heard footsteps inside, and then quiet, and I knew she was looking through the peephole. I stood very still and I looked directly at where the peephole would be, and I said, "It's Mom." The door didn't open for a long time. Long enough that I started to wonder if I had made a mistake. Long enough that the little girl inside started asking something, in a small, persistent voice. Then the door opened. She looked older. She'd cut her hair short and dyed it darker. She was thinner than she had been. She was also, unmistakably, my daughter, standing in the doorway of a yellow house in Decatur, Georgia, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite name, something between relief and terror, and something else that might have been love. The little girl appeared at her knee. She had Adrian's eyes. Neither of us spoke for what felt like a very long time. Then Adrian said, very quietly, "I didn't know if you'd come." I told her I didn't know I was coming until I did it. She stepped back from the door. I walked in. The house was small and clean, and full of the little details that told you someone had made it deliberately into a home. A plant on the windowsill, a child's drawing on the refrigerator, a worn quilt folded over the arm of the couch. I recognized the quilt. It was the one from the craft class. She had taken it with her. We sat at her kitchen table for 4 hours. She talked. I mostly listened, which is not something that comes naturally to me, but I understood that this was not a moment for my own feelings to take up too much space. She told me about the last 18 months of the marriage. Things I had known in outline but not in detail, and that I will not repeat here, because they are hers and not mine. She told me about the plan. The advocate who had helped her find a program that assisted women in exactly her situation, the arrangements that had been made, the body in the accident, a woman who had died alone with no family to claim her, whose remains Adrian had known about through the program, whose fate had been used with the full involvement of people who understood the legal complexity and had navigated it. I do not know all the details, and I have not asked for them. There are things you can understand in principle without needing to know every particular. She told me she had thought about me every day. She said that it nearly broke her, the grief she knew I was carrying, the funeral, the idea of me alone in my house. She said she had wanted to contact me more times than she could count, and had not, because contact was the thing that would have unraveled everything. Because he was still looking. For 2 years he was still looking. For 2 years he was still looking. I asked about the little girl. She smiled, for the first time since I'd walked in, and it was Adrian's smile, the same one from every Christmas morning, every birthday, every Sunday phone call. She told me the little girl's name. She told me she was 2.5. She told me she had been born in this house with a midwife and that she knew her to be the safest thing she had ever done because her daughter would never know the things she had known. I looked at my granddaughter playing on the living room floor, and I felt something I have not felt in 3 years, which is the particular warmth of the future still existing and belonging to you. We talked about what came next. There are still complications. Her husband does not know where she is, and we need to be careful about keeping it that way. There are legal matters that her advocate is helping with. I cannot tell anyone her location who does not absolutely need to know. My cousin already knows. We will tell no one else for now. I drove home that evening as it was getting dark. The azaleas along my street were just starting to bloom. A week or 2 early because of the warm winter, the same way they've been doing the past few years. I pulled into my driveway and I sat there for a while. I thought about the 3 years. I thought about what I lost and what I didn't lose, and how those two things are not the same. I thought about how I had built a life around an absence that was not what I believed it to be, and how I was going to have to now build something else, something that could hold the truth, which is more complicated than the story I had been living inside. I thought about the quilt on her couch. She had taken it with her. She had carried it through all of it. The leaving, the hiding, the building of a new life, and it was still there, worn soft, folded over the arm of the chair. That is the thing I keep coming back to. She took the quilt. She was always planning to survive. I go to see her on Saturdays now. I bring food because that is how I know to love people, and because my granddaughter has decided she likes my biscuits, which is possibly the best thing that has happened to me in years. We sit at the kitchen table and the little girl plays at our feet, and Adrian and I talk the way we used to talk. Slowly, about everything, with long, comfortable pauses in between. There is still anger in me. I want to be honest about that. There are mornings when I wake up and I think about 3 years of Tuesday afternoons at the elementary school, and Saturday mornings in my garden, and Sunday nights without a phone call, and I feel the full weight of what that cost me. I believe I am allowed to feel that. I believe you can hold someone's reasons and still grieve what those reasons took from you. But there is also this. Last Saturday, my granddaughter climbed into my lap while I was sitting at the kitchen table, and she put her small hand on my cheek and looked at me very seriously the way small children do, and she said, "Again." She meant a song I'd been singing. I'd been singing it absently, not even realizing an old song my own mother used to sing when I was small. I sang it again. She closed her eyes and leaned against me. I have had a lot of time these past 3 years to think about what I would choose if I could go back and choose. What I would give to have Adrian with me. What I would give to have her safe. I learned something about the distance between those two things that I did not know before. I know it now. I keep thinking about the quilt. Of all the things Adrian could have taken with her when she left, when she built the exit that looked like a death, when she carried herself out of a life that was hurting her and into one that could hold her, she took a quilt she made in a craft class 2 winters before, something she made with her own hands, something soft and worn and completely without value to anyone who didn't already love her. She knew she was going to survive. Even in the worst of it, some part of her was already planning toward a future. That is not a small thing. That is, I think, the whole thing. I have had 3 years to think about what it means to keep going when the ground falls out from under you. I did not know I was practicing. I thought I was just getting through, but there is something that happens when you make yourself show up, to the book club, to the elementary school on Tuesday afternoons, to the garden in the early morning when everything is still. Even when you don't feel like it means anything. You are building something. You don't know it yet. You are building the person who will be able to handle what comes next. Adrian built something too, under conditions I cannot fully imagine. She had to be clear-headed enough to make a plan and stick to it, brave enough to walk away from everything she knew, and honest enough with herself to understand that staying was not strength, it was just a slower kind of harm. that takes a quality of mind that I don't think comes from nowhere. It comes from practice. From every small decision to think clearly about hard things even when it hurts. And then there is what she did with that clarity. She used it with care. She did not blow up her life recklessly. She worked with people who understood the risks. She thought about the consequences for others, including, I have to believe, me. The grief she caused me was real. I do not minimize it, but the choice she made was not careless. It was the most careful thing she could have done, given what she was working with. She had to weigh my pain against her survival, and she chose survival, and she was right to. I am still working through my feelings about being left out of that. I expect I will be for a long time, but I know this. When I sat at her kitchen table last Saturday and watched my granddaughter put her hand on my cheek and asked me to sing again, I understood something about consequences that I had only known in the abstract before. The choices we make. To stay when we should go, to go when we find the courage, to keep moving when we have every reason to stop. They do not disappear. They accumulate. They become the life that is waiting on the other side. Adrian has flower boxes now. Small ones, painted white, full of something purple I don't know the name of. Every time I pull into a driveway on a Saturday morning, I see them, and every time I think about the fact that she wanted them for years and someone told her they looked tacky, and now she has them and nobody is telling her anything. That is what integrity and courage and clear thinking actually look like in her life. Not grand gestures. Flower boxes. A quilt on a couch. A little girl who will grow up never having to learn what her mother survived. That is enough. That is everything.